A little bit of history I've been through. Ask me where I'm from, and I will tell you I'm a Jew, and every Jew's a proud Jew. Not just me, my sisters and my brothers. Never be ashamed to be a proud Jew. It's not what you've done, it's how he made you. So sing this song and spread the pride around you. Yehudi ani, eternally. Hey Abraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, b'nei Sarah Rivka, Rachel v'Leah. Hey Abraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, b'nei Sarah Rivka, Rachel v'Leah. Ivri anoichi v'yetz Hashem, elikei hashamayim ani yoreh. 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 I'm a Jew and I'm proud and I sing it out loud, 'cause forever and ever that's what I'll be. I'm a Jew and I'm proud and without a doubt Hashem is always watching over me. Ivri anoichi v'yetz Hashem, elikei hashamayim ani yoreh. Ivri anoichi.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our webinar. And as I've said, week after week on a Sunday evening, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had one dream, and that dream was to bring about the Hisgalus of Mashiach. He wanted to bring about Mashiach, and when Mashiach reveals himself, there will be no more wars, no more suffering, no more pandemics, no more jealousy, no more hatred. It'll be a time where godliness will be absolutely revealed in this world. When God destroyed the temple and sent the Jewish people into exile, it was the beginning of that process of Jewish people taking godliness and inspiring, uplifting, and illuminating with godly energy the place they find themselves in. The Rebbe in the 50s started to send people out to different places. I imagine one of the most challenging places in the world is Cambodia. When I grew up, I just remember America having a conflict with Cambodia. I never really understood the details, but President Nixon was sending plane after plane to bomb Cambodia without understanding the details. I just remember that as part of history. But Cambodia to me just sounds like a world of challenges. And here is a young rabbi by the name of Rabbi Butman. Rabbi Butman's father and I studied together in Kfar Chabad Yeshiva in Israel in the late 70s. I had a very close relationship with him. And all of a sudden now his son is the shliach, the emissary in Cambodia, uplifting people. So first of all, this is what we want from you, Rabbi Butman. Number one, we want you to tell us a little bit about Cambodia, a little bit about the history there, the Jews there. We want to hear from you some of your challenges of what you do, what's happening there. We also want to hear from you some teichen, some inspiration for these times. I read on COL, the Chabad news site, it was an amazing story that you had last week in Cambodia with a Jew that came from China. We want to hear about that. And then we want to hear some advice from you on what to do to bring about Mashiach, So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you and thank you for making the time. I know it's about 12:30 in the morning for you at the moment. It's early in the morning. Thank you for doing it.
It's midnight.
Over to you.
Okay, so good evening to all. A pleasure being with you tonight. I hope this is going to be very productive because that's our goal. I'll start with something that took place earlier tonight. As a very small community, particularly now with coronavirus, I try to maintain a one-on-one relationship with every single person in the community. And this year on Simchat Torah, when we auctioned the Chatan Torah to get the Aliyah to complete the entire Torah, we don't auction this for money. We auction this for commitment of Shiur Torah. So like every year, I tell people, you commit to a weekly Torah class. Well, we'll pick a date, we'll pick a location, we'll pick a schedule, and it's a one-on-one thing. So this year, As part of my attempt to get people when there are less people, I turned to someone who loves Yiddish and is fluent in several languages and wants to improve his Yiddish. And I said to him, Daniel, let's improve your Yiddish. Once a week, we'll study something, it will be in Yiddish. He got very excited with the idea and he said, Rabbi, you got me. Count me in once a week. So we studied something 2 weeks ago. We studied something last week. When he came this evening, he said, Rabbi, you know what? I feel I miss out on the content for the time we spend on the language. Why don't we stick to the Torah of it? Let's do this in Hebrew. And he speaks Hebrew fluently too. And Yiddish we'll do at a different time. So when the rabbi introduces me as someone in the most challenging place, which I obviously reject, I will start with a question. What is more challenging, to be a Jew in Jobo or to be a Jew in Phnom Penh? Abraham, our forefather, has gone through a very challenging life, a very productive and active life. He was born and raised into a society of idol worshiping. You may not be aware of what that is. I wasn't aware of what that is until arriving to this part of the world, but that's what it is. 17 million people that are at most unaware at all of Hashem's presence. They know of putting bananas to the Buddha. They know of burning fake $100 bills. They know of visiting the pagoda once in a while. They never deal themselves with the question of, is there a creator? Who is the creator? Why did he create? And so on. We come from the Western world. You don't have to be Jewish in order to be aware. You know the joke about the man who came after the Holocaust and put his daughter in the public school in America. And after a few weeks, she started coming home and saying, you know, a story about Jesus walking on the water and Jesus doing this. And at first, father didn't do anything. But after a few times, he got very upset. He said, listen, honey, come, we got to talk about this. We have only one God, and we don't believe in him. Everything else they tell you in school is nonsense, because there's only one, which we don't believe in. So in Western society, everybody knows there's one God. Okay, you believe to that extent, to this extent. Here, people are absolutely unaware, and that's the environment to which Abraham was raised. And he himself came to a conclusion with a logical thinking. He says, there's a sun, there's a moon. How are they moving without anyone moving them? How can there be a production without a producer? And so he came to realization there is God, and he developed that realization over the years, of course. And then he realized that this knowledge should be shared with everyone around him. It's unfair that we, human beings, are part of this world and benefit from this, of course, and don't recognize the creator. And so he went from one person to the next and spreaded the knowledge. It came a time when his father left him in the idol shop alone, and one lady came to give food for the idol, and he convinced her out of it, saying that it doesn't, do you think that the idol eats it? No, he doesn't. So why do you do it? Maybe you're right. So she steps back, another lady comes, but at some point he lost patience. He broke all the idols in the shop. He left only one idol. He tied a hammer to the idol's hand, and when dad came back home, he told dad, don't ask, it was to me, you think I'm the troublemaker, it's not in this case. The big idol, the idols were fighting with one another, who was stronger, and eventually they had a fight, and the big idol won the fight. And dad says, are you crazy? These things can't move. And Abraham answered, if they cannot move, who is the crazy one? Dad was not impressed with the answer and took him to Nimrod, which was back then the high priest. And Nimrod said, if you don't go back from all your nonsense, we'll throw you to the fire. And Abraham says, there's no way I can proclaim this is nonsense. This is ultimate truth. There's one God. We cannot see him. He's the one that we should be serving. And Abraham was thrown to the fire, miraculously surviving. Someone else was thrown and died. Beautiful story, right? It's supposed to be in this week's Parsha, because last week spoke about the flood, about Noach, and then 10 generations from Noach to Abraham. And this week's Parsha, however, starts with the story of Hashem revealing himself to Abraham at the age of 75. And we ask, this is what we study today. He said, where are those 75 beautiful years? Abraham is working so hard. He's even risking his life. Hashem didn't reveal himself to him empty. Hashem revealed himself to him because of those great years of work. And here we go back to the question of what is a challenge. I'll get back to this later. Let's dive into life in Cambodia. Tonight actually celebrates 14 years to my very first meeting with my wife. And when I first met her, we knew we're meeting for business purposes. We weren't wasting time. So one of the very first questions that came up is, what will you do in your future as a married person? And of course, the concept of shlichut came up right away. So tonight we're celebrating 14 years for that conversation, an agreement with shlichut.
What does shlichut mean?
Shlichut is the Chabad commitment of a couple to settle in a place in which there is no other center and run a Chabad house, run a place for others to have. A mission. Shlichut in the literal meaning means a mission. And being that we are here as part of the Rebbe's desire to have Judaism and reaching every Jew and every Jew feeling comfortable wherever he is, not only with spiritual needs, but also with materialistic needs. That's why we call ourselves Shluchim, as carrying a mission of his. And definitely to survive in places like here, you do need to be motivated, and that is our motivation. So this is the shlichut, the mission that we took upon ourselves 14 years ago. Though I must say that when we were sitting in a hotel in Chicago back in 2007, Cambodia wasn't on the list. I wasn't even aware of this country. We were thinking more like somewhere in the US, close to home. My wife is from Chicago. I actually was born and raised in Israel, but close to home, close to her home, sometime an hour flight, 2-hour flight, that would be great. We also, after our marriage, looked into different places within the US. However, reality was that other places didn't work out, and we found ourselves at a later stage willing to take even greater challenges, knowing that you're not going to move on, not going to do a relocation like this with 3 children. If we're not doing it now, may not happen later. And so when Cambodia, which is a long story of its own, came as an option, we were brave enough to look to give it a try. We were here first, as mentioned on the brochure, on Pesach 2009. And what attracted our attention so strongly then was the thirst of Yidden, of Jews, to Yiddishkeit. My afikoman was stolen over the Shabbos, the Seder table. And when I asked where it is, a bunch of people pointed that they have it. I said, like, what's now? You want me to buy you an iPhone? And they said, no, we need you to promise us that there will be a permanent Chabad center in Cambodia. We don't have anything. We want to have a shul here. We want to have a place, And I looked at my wife, and my wife said, don't look at me. We made a deal. We're not talking about whether we're coming or not for another month. She knew me already. And so I somehow managed to get the afikoman from them. I said, I'll pass it on to the headquarters and follow up with it, blah, blah. 3 days later, at the very small airport, international airport of Phnom Penh, I was standing with my wife and young baby boy, ready to board our flight. And someone comes running from the other side. He came over to me, and he handed me his business card, as they do here, with 2 hands. And he says to me, Rabbi, when you come to New York, give me a call. And I thought something happened. It looked like an emergency to me. I looked at the card. I saw the name was Adam. I said, Adam, is everything okay? He says, yeah, everything is great. I just want to follow up with you on the Pesach promise. He said, you're going to send a letter to the headquarters, so we need to know what's going on. He points out his cell phone, and he gives me the card. And then he had to run back to his flight. I remember this moment, because until today, when we passed at that point at the airport, I showed this to my wife as the point. I was standing there holding his card with 2 hands. He was already not there. I looked at my wife and I said, look, Mashi, we'll be opening a center in Peachtree City in Atlanta, as one of the places as we looked into, or Redwood City in California. And I will suspect that someone is Jewish, and I'll go over to him and he'll deny it. And second time, I'll meet him at his office, and he's going to send the secretary out to say that he's busy. I'll finally meet him buying gefilte fish at the supermarket, and he won't be able to deny it anymore. He's going to hand me a business card, but he's going to make sure to only give me the office number. And look how thirsty these Yidden are. So some may call it a challenge, and I won't hide. There's a lot of things here that are not easy. Kosher food is very limited. Some things we have more than others. Others we learned how to manage without. The lack of ability to ever eat food which is not prepared by our kitchen is definitely hard. But it definitely pays off with the thirst of Yidden to Yiddishkeit, the thirst of people to what we do, the ongoing understanding and appreciation of people to what we're doing here. We are the only Jewish present in 220,000 square kilometers. This creates tons of humanitarian work. The Rabbi just mentioned something that unfolded last week, but it's a story from a half a year ago. One of more than 10 people that we literally saved from death, as he was hospitalized here in Phnom Penh. And if I wouldn't intervene and move him to another hospital, pay the bills without knowing where I would be paid back from, and so on, he probably wouldn't have survived. A great man, a lawyer from the US, came to retire in China, came here because of the virus, back when the virus would threaten China and no threat in other places, and somehow got a medical condition, admitted to a local hospital. We have stories like this. We have plenty. I had a story with South Africa. You're from Job. I know Job is big, but some of you may know Mr. Jeff Shankman, who was left here, a medicine that was very important.
What's his name?
Jeff Shankman.
Jeff Shankman from Pretoria.
He left an important medication here. He called me up. I was in the middle of a Hanukkah party. 20 minutes later, I was in the car, driving fast to the airport. A half hour later, I was at the airport. And even though I have connections at the airline, because again, the airport is small and the airport manager knows me, and he could not convince the staff of the flight to take that small bottle of medication with them to Bangkok. And I said to him, this is very important. It's I wouldn't say life and death, but it's a medication and she needs to consume it within the next 24 hours. If they're refusing to get the medication on the flight, then I'll go on the flight. So he called up again to the second floor, the airport manager, and he said to them, if you don't take the medication, then can send someone downstairs back and check him into the flight. So they said, if he comes without luggage, we can do that. Of course, I was without luggage. I was luckily with my passport. So I checked into the flight, came upstairs to the gate, and then I realized I didn't even tell my wife that I'm leaving. So I first bought myself a ticket for the next morning to come back, and then called my wife and said, the bad news is I'm not home tonight. The good news is tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. I'm back home. And that's what I did. I came to the airport in Bangkok, deposited the medication onto another domestic flight, which will fly to the islands, to Koh Samui. And by the time the medication arrived at Mr. Shankman's hands in Koh Samui, I was already back home in Phnom Penh. We have had medical evacuations, helicopter evacuations. I escorted people on flights because they were ill or because unfortunately they used drugs that they shouldn't have. Escorted people mentally and all kind of lost lost travelers, stolen passports, you know, all kinds of stories. Things do happen. And when there's no one else around, we're the address for everything. We've even established a Jewish cemetery here about 5 years ago by now, and just 5 weeks ago, we buried 5th person there at the cemetery. So now there is a Jewish cemetery as well. And actually, the cemetery is the one and only function that isn't out of our building. A lot of miracles happen through this place. A lot of people admire the place a lot, and a lot of people feel that this helps them. And I guess in return, Hashem pours a lot of blessings over us. So 4 short years after coming here, we committed to buying a land, which again is a long story. And miraculously, within 2 years from that commitment, we inaugurated this building. We're now in a 6-story building that has an industrial kitchen, a food service, both in and take away, a ladies' mikvah, a shul, which I'm at now, a social hall, which can host up to 150 people, my residence, a library, offices, storage space, guest units, preschool, and dormitory for backpackers, and a beautiful rooftop, which was already hosted a wedding 2.5 years ago of people who met through our Chabad. A few more stories of marriage also happened through here. Some are in the making. One of them started Friday night, and I really, really hope this works, because the boy is part of our community, and people who are here for long are at great risk of marrying out, because there aren't many girls out here, especially now with the coronavirus, with much less traffic. So please, Hashem, use this farbring and this Hasidic gathering. I'll ask for all of you to say amen for this, either this or whatever needs to work, but they should both find their match, hopefully together. And if not, I'm not in matchmaking, you know, it's Hashem in heaven, but it should work for all of us to not be challenged in this very basic and important mitzvah of keeping our children within our faith. I know a lot of questions run through your mind, like how do you get kosher food? And what do you do with education of the children? So,
How many
as I
people
mentioned,
live in Cambodia?
say that again.
How many people living? How many Jewish? How big is the population of Cambodia? How many Jewish people are in Cambodia? Is there any conflict in the island?
There are about 17 million people estimated in the population. There are about 80 to 100 Jews in regular times residents in my city, and then maybe another 60 to 80 Jews in other towns, all scattered all over the place. We're in touch with all of them. Just now before Sukkot, I sent lulav and etrog to 10 different towns, villages, and islands to different people. Some people are away now because of the virus, so they went back to hometown, because none of us is a native Cambodian. There are a few cases of conversion. None of them took place through us. These are all expats, like people that have left Cambodia and converted, including a grandchild of not the king that passed away 5 years ago, but the one who passed away 60 years ago, who had wives at a later age, young wives. His youngest and the only one alive was ambassador to Washington, D.C., along with her husband, who was her cousin. And their daughter married a Persian Jew, Iranian Jew, they met in Nevada. They now, she ended up converting. They now run a full kosher house. They were here actually last year, Hanukkah. They had a royal bat-mitzvah, which was recorded at the Royal Palace History Book as part of the Royal Palace event. But most of us are expats from all over. We have Jews from South Africa, several. We have from America, of course, from Australia, from London, from France, from Russia, from Israel. From Gibraltar, we have a fellow who's here for 6 years from Gibraltar. Anywhere, basically from anywhere. And Jews do here what they do in other places. You know, some are lawyers, of course. Some are business people. Some run businesses, investments for others. Some are just retired, freelancers, reporters. All kinds of people are here as part of our community. Now, generally, I would say there are business people and five-star travelers and backpackers. Backpackers about 2,000 a year. That adds up about 30 to 50 backpackers to every Friday night table. Then the other travelers and business people depends more on the season, sometimes more, sometimes less. But right now with the virus, access to this country is harder. It's possible, but it's much harder. So very few people that I know have made it back to the country, either back because they left immediately or back because they haven't been here for a while. People who come here for occasionally for business trips have not yet come back, let alone backpackers and travelers, which reduces greatly the amount of people we're able to touch these days. I have much more time for myself and my children, spending a few hours a day learning with them, which is a great pleasure on its own. That's as far as the Jewish community. I would say more than this, that many of the expats living in Cambodia come here for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years. So even though the community is about 100 Jews in Phnom Penh, which means about 20 regulars, like week in, week out, Friday night, Shabbos day, we have probably had closer to 200 regulars and over 1,000 of our community, which are circulating, are changing basically every 2-3 years. I've just went through with my wife through a list of people that we have dealt with in the past, and it's definitely amazing to see how many people are there. These people are back in their hometowns, are connected usually to Chabad in their places, because that's part of our work, is to connect people from here to there. And with this, I'll go back to the question of what is a greater challenge. In my opinion, Jewish life in Jobo, or in Brooklyn, or in Jerusalem is to some extent a greater challenge than here. And the proof for it is this week's Parsha. Ignoring the activities of Abraham for 75 years, not looking at the fact that he devoted himself so strongly, even not giving the stage to the fact that he sacrificed his life when he was thrown to the fire. Why? Because this was all what he was used to, what the lifestyle that he adapted, his own understanding, his own desire, even though his desire was to do good things, it was his desire. At the age of 75, Hashem came to him and said to him, stop what you're doing. Do not focus on your desire. Do not focus on what you're used to. Go to what I want. Hey, what did he want until now? Wasn't that what Hashem wants? The answer is that when Hashem forms Judaism, it's not about what you want. It's not about a human efforts to reach to Hashem. It's about Hashem making himself accessible to us, letting himself down, reaching his hand down so we can grab it. You see, the difference between Jews and non-Jews on the connection to Hashem is not only that they have 7 laws and we have 613 laws. It's in essence of what these laws are meant to do. The 7 laws are meant for the world to become a great place. Just like you host someone, you expect him to feel at home to some extent. You know, he doesn't need to wash dishes, but not to go too wild, not to keep the air conditioner on for no reason, and so on. You want to, a city is opening a park and is letting everyone to come to the park. It's a designated area for the barbecues. You're supposed to put the trash in the garbage bin and so on. That's what Hashem expects of everyone else aside for us. Maintain a proper world in which we can all be feeling comfortable to live at. We have 613 laws that are not only meant to keep this world a good place, but are meant to form a connection between us and Hashem. When Hashem asks something and we fulfill what he wants, we're connected to him. We're connected to him not because we are making our efforts. We're connected to him because he offered us this connection. The connection that we have to him, the recognition of Abraham as a 3-year-old child, and later on as he grew, was his own mind. It's great, it's marvelous. It's not tourism. It's actually a basic expectation that Hashem has of each and every human being. The same way when you're a guest at someone's house, you're supposed to recognize your host. The same way when you're part of society, you're supposed to recognize God as the one providing you the society, the world, the air to breathe, the food to eat, the ability to sleep, to walk, and so on. That's not tourism. That's basic life. That's what Abraham was doing, and he was doing great. But that's not what Torah tells us. Torah starts the story from the age of 75. Lech lecha me'artzecha. That's the name of the parsha. Lech lecha. Get out of yourself. Get out of your comfort zone. Break your desire for my desire, says God. Now you tell me, where is it harder to break your desire? In Phnom Penh or in Joburg? I heard Nussbaum closed, but you still have a lot of good meat over there, right? Kosher meat and restaurants, and you can run a regular life just like someone else. A little bit limited because the amount of restaurants that you have isn't as many as the non-kosher ones, but still, and with the schools and with the system, you can keep the comfort of Artzecha and Moladcha. You can keep the comfort of where you feel safe and secured for your own habits and still be Jewish. But Hashem requests, don't just go to your comfort zone. Get out of yourself. Demand of yourself. Break what you want for what I want. In this part, I think Phnom Penh is easier. It doesn't mean that you don't have to do this when you're in Jago. You should. It doesn't have to be as hard as not having a kosher restaurant. Enjoy the kosher restaurants. Enjoy King David's school. Enjoy the Chabad schools. Enjoy a lot of good things that you can do there. But make sure you go out of your comfort zone to do something that is hard for you because Hashem wanted. L'chaim.
Rabbi Butman, absolutely outstanding. What happened with the I saw on CNL this week a story. What happened?
I mentioned this. The man came from, he was a lawyer. He came from China. He went through some kind of a medical. We have in the community, we have a doctor who is here from the American Navy.
Is that the CRL story?
What?
Is that the CRL story?
Yes. And so anything to do with the medical part of the event, I know less about. I was communicating between them, and I also, when one hospital required a medevac for $50,000, which the men didn't have, pointing that they don't have a certain treatment, I discussed this with the doctor, and the doctor suggested that it may be possible to be found in another hospital. I did make a few phone calls, but that doesn't mean that I remember now what was this treatment that they were looking for. So I don't know what the condition was. I can tell you that the hospital he was at wasn't the greatest, to say the least. He would not, in realistic eyes, he wouldn't have survived. And it was when I got involved that I pushed. He just arrived to the city less than a week before that incident. And just like a good Jew coming from China, the first thing he did, or one of the first things he did, is contacting me, saying, hello, I'm a Jew, I just arrived in town. How are you? And I said, come over, let's meet. And when after meeting, I said, let's come Friday night. He said, he'll come Friday night. He didn't show up Friday night. So I called him up and he wasn't answering. Doesn't mean much. I saw the man once. Maybe he doesn't like me, but doesn't like the place. Maybe he was busy, he doesn't want to answer the phone. But 3 hours later, he called me and he said, I'm in the hospital. So all I asked is, which hospital? I already learned. People come here without relatives. When someone tells me I'm in the hospital, now I become his brother, his father, his son, his whatever. So as soon as he said, in the hospital, all I asked is which hospital. I packed a good sandwich, which he wasn't able to eat, and rushed to the hospital. And upon coming there, I realized where things are holding. Turning into the great hospital, they were claiming that they can't do it, only made evacuation to their branch in Bangkok. Later in the day, we found another hospital that was able to take him, and a few days, it wasn't long even. And he was able to get back to himself, and later on he was dismissed, and he ended up back in China as soon as China opened the borders for those I wanted to go back.
Just tell us a day in the life of Rabbi Butman, a regular day before COVID.
A regular day before COVID. I think I remember what happened before COVID. I would start with the fact that there is no regular day, because again, a lot of things are unexpected. But between taking care of the Jews that are here in the city and taking care of Jews that are out of the city, running Shirei Torah classes for these people both. I also have a Torah class for the once a week for the backpackers who are not any longer here and want to keep in touch. It's a Hebrew class through Zoom before Zoom became so popular. Hosting people regularly, people easily 10, 15 people come in a day, and everyone wants the attention of saying hello and hearing what we do and how long we're here, and going through this very lecture that I gave now that I used to give much more often on a regular base one-on-one. I now give it about every 2 or 3 weeks because Chabad around the world has moved to Zoom and they're looking for guest speakers. That used to be part of my day, putting on the phone with people, asking gently about Chabad in their hometowns, because in many times, again, because people are in their comfort zone, they may not be aware that around the corner from them there's Chabad. I'm going to get to the building in a second. I found this year, for a family we're in touch with and were unable to go to their shul, that they have a Chabad house 4 minutes walking from their home. And now they got in touch with them for Rosh Hashanah, and ever since they're in touch. Someone asked about the shul. I mentioned it. I don't know how much time we still have, but it was a great miracle, to say the least. We went into a lease on a building when we first came here for 2 years, and then we extended for another 2 years, and then after 4 years, the landlord informed us that they're not extending the rent. And if there was a time in the 11 years that we are here that I felt that I cannot handle it, if I didn't seriously consider quitting, but I at least said to my wife that such thought entered my mind, it was then. I can't explain it, but being kicked out of the place that was home for us for 4 years, and I felt it so, and it was a good deal financially, and anywhere else wasn't a good location and was much more expensive, and it was smaller and so on. It was around this time of the year, actually. We went to Kinus HaShluchim, the gathering of Chabad emissaries from all over the world. This is back in 2013. I came to the Rebbe's graveside and I burst out crying because I could not handle the pressure. It was 2 weeks before moving out was due. Could not find anything else. And then I was sitting and writing my heart, and why does it happen to us? We're here for 4 years. We're working so hard. There's such great results. What's going to be in 2 weeks? And then I was writing as my thoughts were continuing. I said, and what's going to happen? Let's say I'm going to come back and I'm going to find another place. And in 2 years or 4 years, the new landlord will tell me that I have to go through this again. And then I said, perhaps the reason why it happened is because we're not supposed to move to another rented place. We're supposed to move into our own place. So I said, Rebbe, I will commit to move into our own place, but we need time for this. It will take time. So I said, I'm committing to move to our own place within 2 years. And now that I understand why this happened to us, because obviously from heaven they were waiting for my commitment, and I've committed. Now the nudnik, that's how I wrote. The landlord, the nudnik, can get off my back because I committed. Now I need my 2 years. I'll work on it. By the end of 2 years, I'll have it. I left the oil. I was there at the Rebbe's gravesite for a while. I left the oil so uplifted. I called up my wife with excitement. I said, Mashi, we're moving to our own place. So she said, what happened? Someone gave you $1 million? That's what she heard in my voice. I said, no, nobody gave me money, but I committed and we're moving to our own place. She said, stop it. You're coming back less than 2 weeks than the time of moving. And if you'll buy a land, what, are you going to open a tent over there? Let's first take care of now. Now we need to find a new rented place. Then you give space for your dreams. Perhaps she knows me well. I said, don't worry about this. It will be good. I landed back I remember this clear. I landed back with Korean Air flight on Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, I'm in the car on the way to Chabad. We lived at a different location. And my phone rings. It was the real estate agent that tells me that the landlord has agreed to extend the rent on the condition he wants 50% raise in the rent fee. Wasn't terrible, I can tell you clear. It was still below market price, but I was so confident. I was so not shocked. And I said to him, tell the landlord that if he's willing to extend the rent, let's meet to discuss the details. And the real estate agent got very upset with me. He said, you can't do this. You already told him before that you're willing to pay 150%. And why are you now saying no? And also he couldn't understand where this came from. So I asked him, tell me, when did the landlord call you? And he said to me, it was that time that I was in the oil, that the landlord called him to tell him that it's okay. You have to understand, I made the landlord meet a 4-star general, which is like a life joker. I don't even know how to explain this, but here everything is through connections and through, I'll do a favor to you, you'll do a favor to me. And this is a very high rank person that I got through another Jew. And this high rank person asked the landlord to let us stay, and that he didn't want to. And then this general got upset with my Jew because he never heard no from anyone. And this guy is too stubborn, and why is he so stubborn, and so on. We were sitting together, and I said to the landlord, how long are we extending the contract for? And he said, how long do you want? My bad. I should have said 2 years because I had a commitment. But after going through such harsh few weeks, I said, what if things there, here, there? I said to him, 3 years. He said, absolutely not. 2 years, not 1 day more. 2 years later to the date, it was December 1st, 2015, which fell on Yutet Kislev, which is a great holiday for us in Rosh Hashanah Chassidut, the New Year of Hasidism. 2 years later, we're sitting here over the article in the local paper. We got a front page. It didn't speak about the fact that we inaugurated a 6-story building. They showed a photo of us crossing the street and police blocking the street. And they wrote 30 rabbis came to Phnom Penh to celebrate an inauguration. That was, the building is not the big deal, but 30 rabbis in Phnom Penh, that was a big photo for them. So that was exactly 2 years later. Lots of stories about how it happened. Of course, there was a lot of financial challenges. We still haven't totally completed the building. We're towards the end. But yeah, now we have a 6-story building that, as I mentioned, hosts everything aside for the cemetery as part of the crazy, crazy revealed blessings that we have from heaven in this place. Here I have a model of the building, which we gave out as a souvenir at inauguration. So we have the restaurant and industrial kitchen in the bottom floor, and then goes shul, which we're at now. We're actually near this window. There is an elevator, of course. Then we have the social hall, my home, guest units, preschool, storage and offices, and a rooftop. And the sukkah is right here, hosting about this year less, but usually 50, 60 people for the first night of Sukkot. That's it on my side. And I would suggest for everyone to, I know you have a woe in your mind, but turn your woe from someone who is not on the other side of the globe, but far away from you, into the where can I do this woe in my own life? Where can I do the lech lecha me'artzecha? Doing something out of my routine for Hashem in me. It can be an hour of Torah class. Your rabbi sounds like a great Torah scholar. I'm sure his classes are great. It can be putting on tefillin, it can be lighting Shabbat candles. It can be something big or something small, something that will break your routine and give Hashem nachat. When he will have the nachat, this is the answer to the rabbi's question, will give us Mashiach.
Thank you, Rabbi Butman. It's truly uplifting, and it's beautiful to hear both the thought, life of Cambodia, and just your general stories. They're beautiful. So we really appreciate your time, and we appreciate giving us the lessons and giving us a chayes to go into the week and also future. So thank you so much. And to all who joined in, thank you. Please join us tomorrow night, Kabbalah on the weekly Parsha. Have a great evening.